In all the things I covered, I observed, like many others, the events of 2019 in the digital documentation and journalism that is growing more common. The topic of Hong Kong is a topic where the effects of in 2014 is leading to this day. I'll explain later what I mean by that. In the new episode of Why I Have My Stances on China, Hong Kong will be my focus. I have always understood Hong Kong not to be a country or independent thing. Although with China's consent, Hong Kong has its own sub-representation in trade dealings, some Olympic affairs, and some UN affairs. So for me, my whole life was ever since I was born, Hong Kong was China, within the SAR context. Therefore, some of my family has links to Hong Kong pre-return to the motherland. Myself, I do not. It always was so, with my birth having Hong Kong be officially signed back to China for at least 2 months. Therefore, if I ever exposed any colonial politics about Hong Kong, it would not be due to any reason or rationality. Hong Kong being a place where it had some momentums of China's history shown, with that period being chaotic and a legacy of colonial development, and its implications shown also. In both positive and negative terms, Hong Kong has become China's reform and open up area of accomplishment, so to speak. So when Hong Kong is mentioned in representation, those born before 1997 and after matters. So in relation to this, I fully acknowledge that Hong Kong is a SAR under the People's Republic of China, history in imperialism and Chinese politics, 1981. That's a book, by the way. It quotes says, by the Treaty of Nanking, not Nanjing, Nanking, with a K, 1842, Britain extracted from China a indemnity totaling 21 million silver dollars and robbed China of the territory of Hong Kong. So, there is a standard where Hong Kong was a target of Western approach. The approach from the UK and other powers was then to control and manipulate areas of China for their gain. The Treaty of Nanking, for example, opened up with the actions of the Qing, Hong Kong and other areas of China to colonial control. Could Hong Kong have been an economic powerhouse if the Treaty of Nanking was refused and the Qing resisted? Who knows? But the reality of things had Hong Kong in limbo. The weakness of the Kuomintang and the Qing had Hong Kong remain under the UK. I'll explain what I mean by that. Therefore, speculation about if the Qing had dealt with corruption and got a backbone would have developed Hong Kong is a useless discussion, as the power differences between the British Empire and the Qing under the Chinese Empire was vast in scale. The military means alone and financial means in the growth that the British Empire had was in favour of British Empire. So they developed more under the British Empire. It's not out of the question in this of if they had more benefit out of making the colonial outpost a good Asian outpost. The difference between 1842 and 1980s, where the lead up to Hong Kong being an SAR started, has critical differences. The documentation from 1985 CPC National Conference has key information about the fate of Hong Kong and the area around it. Before we talk about that, there is another element which has critical mention: the question of Chinese representation in Hong Kong under colonial occupation. People moving to Hong Kong from the mainland at every stage of UK colonialism was not due to development of being superior per se, but rather, as pointed out by George Lai in 2022, the Chinese government routinely resorted to extreme measures to uphold imperial authority, and summary executions without trial were routinely carried out. It was reported that in the summer of 1855, some 70,000 people were beheaded by Guangzhou City. It was estimated that more than half of those people were actually innocent of the charge of rebellion. And this is just in one city. Such was the criminal justice in China at the time. In contrast, in British Hong Kong, in the same period, the most high-profile case was Edison Bakery incident in 1857, where several hundred European residents were poisoned after eating bread from a Chinese-owned Esping bakery in Hong Kong. The proprietor of the bakery, I'm not going to say his name because I can't pronounce it very well, was accused of plotting the poisoning, but he got a fair trial at the colonial court. Due to lack of evidence, he was acquitted by the jury. It is no wonder then that a large number of mainland Chinese migrated to Hong Kong in this period. The population of the colony went from 7,500 in 1841 to 77,000, of whom 75,000 were Chinese, in 1857. Which follows up by saying, for much of the time, the British rule, except for a few ethnic appointed for the legislative and executive council at the top levels of government, was dominated by white British. In the 19th century, Chinese were often treated differently and more harshly than Caucasians by the colonial law enforcement and justice system. And from 1904 to 1946, for public health reasons, in response to the bubonic plague epidemic that ran from 1894 to 1829, to protect Europeans from the poor hygiene practices of the Chinese, ethnic Chinese people were banned by law from living in one area of Hong Kong that the law reserved for non-Chinese, effectively a form of legalized segregation. How did the situation in China compare to this? The Chinese government was not democratic, so ordinary Chinese people hardly had more power in China. Not only that, but as the same case in Hong Kong, up till 1912, they are not even ruled by the same people of their own ethnicity, nor were they treated equally. So both with the Qing and the British Empire, the problem with equal measure. What it was to be Chinese was more so cultural, as the Manchus' reign over China was on the direction to decline and collapse by the Qing's corruption. David Bandasky 2011 said, buying your way into a intendant of the circuit position was no problem. If you forked out enough money and had sufficient contacts to back you up, You could work your way in before too long. Getting a prefectural magistracy was possible too. At most, you would have to wait 3 to 5 years to get there, but county magistrates owned various assistant positions were tough to get into, and without the right connections you could wait 8 or 10 years without any luck. The people paying for a chance to get into these posts were often middling types, even from insignificant families. Many of this ilk had even borrowed money to get in to the waiting list, with the idea of paying back their loans with interest once they got nabbed an official position to profit from. But some wasted away the years without seeing an opportunity to come along, barely able to keep food on the table. Demand generated supply. Many on the official waiting lists didn't have ready the cash to get in by the back door, so a whole industry emerged to supply loans to officials in waiting. Those people would issue loans to those wanting officials, providing them with cash so they didn't need to get a foot in the door. They needed to get a foot in the door. Sorry. Those loans didn't need to be paid, but the issuers staked a claim to private advisory roles in fiscal and secretarial matters within the official yamen. Particularly those clerical positions were most lucrative, so they could themselves earn back the principals they had loaned out. As for those clerks' positions, those officials who had posts by paying their way in through the reserve system had no say whatsoever. Those high-level officials who had a say in giving you a post, a commissioner, a governor or viceroy, would always have their own people recommend to you, and you would had not choose but to accept them, because those clerks were on the make. Choice to make. So, as soon as you were settled in your official post, after a year of 3 to 5 years, most of these clerks recommended to you had to be used as they were lined up before you. It was really impossible to make use of someone's services when you had to at least offer them signature. Those officials in waiting, often who had no money to work and who wouldn't borrow the funds necessary to buy their way into the system, could often only wait to starve to death in the provincial capital, freezing to death if not starving. So the issue was a case of being the devil you know, Western colonialism, or the corruption that could sell you out and kill you for betting against you when they are themselves out of touch with the people targeting patriotic Chinese people who tried to stand their ground against Western colonialism, Manchu Qing Empire. The state within the Qing was in decline, with the rise and positioning of the Republic of China being inevitable. So when it happened, the Republic of China retained the weakness of the state, and Hong Kong still could not be liberated. The Civil War won't be covered here, as that is its own separate side topic. But the summary is the Republic of China failed to be a true representation, just like the Qing. Unrest and rebellion happened once again, and what China is today is resulted from that. Now, let's deal with the case of 1985 CPC National Congress documents. The documents of the 1985 CPC National Congress, as I mentioned before, opens up China to foreign investment. The rhetoric cited by the documents with Uphold and Strive for Realization of Socialist Development, documents of the CPC National Conference, September 1958, page 59. The Central Committee hopes that the people of all nationalities, including our compatriots in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, all Chinese nationals overseas, all the children of the Yellow Emperor who love the motherland, will make unremitting efforts to achieve China's reunification and rejuvenation. The extract about Beijing and the British Empire matters as on page 44/45 it says, the special economic zones, the coastal cities opened to the outside world, the Zhejiang, Pearl, River and Xinjiang, Yangtze, River Delta. These areas should adjust their production set up in accordance to the export needs. We should continue to apply special policies and flexible measures in Guangdong and the Fujian provinces. Development these places to make it possible for them to play a more effective role as China's vanguard in opening up to the outside. In the first case, it was imperialism deciding that the ports open up to the outside world. In the 1985 case, it is the choice of the CPC to do a planned opening up as part of national rejuvenation. For some, Hong Kong returning back to China was a bad thing, with the reality of things being that some people never accepted the reality of things. The case of Martin Lee is a perfect example. Radio Free Asia citing Martin Lee, it was important for Hong Kong to avert the Chinese sovereignty because of their mother and child relationship. While saying legislator Martin Lee said residents only have themselves to blame if they voluntarily give up some of their rights and freedoms. The 1997 article adds on by saying, Lee says journalists, civil servants and business leaders will be especially important in working to keep Hong Kong free. His comments followed a weekend statement by human rights organisation Amnesty International warning against complicity on the part of business community and the people of Hong Kong. The statement by Amnesty Asia Pacific Director Rory, I'm not going to say his name, no point, says an erosion in fundamental freedoms in Hong Kong may occur gradually as the British colony becomes the Chinese Special Administrative Region. So, from day one, Hong Kong as the SAR was critiqued by figures which to this day still critique Hong Kong. Martin Lee in 2019 saying to the Conversation, it's a academic website by the way, the kids know it, we all know it, we fear Hong Kong and will become just another Chinese city. And we know that in the early 1970s, as a concession to China, they removed Hong Kong from the United Nations list of colonies entitled to self-government. During the early handover negotiations, their diplomats often said we were interested in money, not democracy. When it came down to introducing elections, they dragged their feet. There should be free and fair elections right away from the beginning to the handover negotiations. The British delayed until it was too late. So, the discussion around Hong Kong is diverse. For some, Hong Kong being ruled by patriots is a sign of opposition and incursion. Again, using Martin Lee, whose case, in this essence, ended in 2021, being arrested for national security law violations. There is many like him who want Hong Kong to be separated from China in culture. Thus, why I mentioned at the start of the video. So when Hong Kong is mentioned in representation, those born before and after 1997 matters. I and others who are born post 1997 can accept Hong Kong as China and what it is. And others pursue the past of what Hong Kong was. Localists like Joshua Wong, Jimmy Lai, Martin Lee fail to understand what Hong Kong post 1997 is, seeking what it can't be to be real. As Xi Jinping said in 2013, Hong Kong, Macau, and the Chinese mainland are closely linked to destiny. To realize the Chinese dream, the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, Hong Kong, Macau, and the Chinese mainland must pool and share our strength and seek common development. In 2017, Xi Jinping also said, Hong Kong has joined us on our journey towards the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. As a special administrative region directly under the central government, Hong Kong was reintegrated into the Chinese national governance system on the very day of its return. And Xi Jinping saying in the 2023 New Year speech, we will continue to support Hong Kong and Macau in harnessing their distinctive strengths, better integrating themselves into China's overall development, and securing long-term prosperity and stability. China will surely be reunited, and all Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should be bound by a common sense of purpose and share in the glory of rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So there is two angles of the two polarities shown by the people. The stance of more in line of, let's say, Martin Lee, of course, is not an exact one-to-one, because it's like there's other stances as well, but it's, as I'm sure you can understand, a simplification for the sake of time. Or the line of Xi Jinping. The discussion is around, in most cases, national reunification, Hong Kong localization, and Hong Kong separatism. Of course, I am saying things with reduced complexity to prove the point, but it relates to the stance I hold, can best explain what my position is. And now I go into my actual thoughts directly. To this extent, I will say, much of the dynamics surrounding it is an interesting point, because a lot of the dynamics around the discussion around Hong Kong itself, of course, that was a more scripted element in the first segment. I literally got research, got book quotes, some website sources, and of course I will cite the book names, so if you want to find out and read it, you can. And also, if you want to look at the web sources, you can as well, so it's all good. So, what I will say though is this, going forward. Much of the points I mentioned there is actually of critical relevance. Because why I have the position I have what I have is due to the historical nature of things. In what sense does the right of the UK have to own Hong Kong? As a means, it was done by conquest, fundamentally, and even then they protected it by threats and conquest and military gains at the same time. So therefore, as a direct result, what then happened in terms of the points surrounding it. Because there's a source I haven't put on screen because, well, it was an interesting source, but it was not really relevant. It was basically someone documenting multiple times of their life dealing with and around Hong Kong. And one time they were basically talking about armaments and preparing for war against the Communist Party of China, basically in the early phases before the reform and open up period, because there was a civil war going on between the nationalists and the communists. The communists were on the border, basically armed, obviously, and yeah, that was the thing. In any case, it is what it is. But the point is, in this, is that fundamentally, what I find it most interesting about this topic is the actual point of question and dynamics surrounding it, because a lot of it is focused on the, at least in a lot of Western senses, around the point of human rights, democracy, and so on. Such things for me is a bit of a vague thing, because in a lot of senses, a lot of people don't seem to understand. They don't really have democracy at home themselves. So before they want to talk about democracy overseas, they should really try and sort it out themselves. Therefore, what that means is that a lot of the dynamics at play when they want to talk about such things is very much a rule of clean your own room before talking about other people's rooms themselves. Because if you don't clean your own room in the first place, you're not necessarily going to have a good situation, are you? My thoughts on, therefore, why I'm a physician is a summarization of some of those points mentioned in there. Much of the points around it is about historical precedent, primarily. Because realistically, given the situation of things, and even just logistically, Hong Kong itself cannot become a nation by itself. Singapore can function because of other means, but then they have problems. But the point is, Hong Kong as a separate and independent state will not function very well. It's the reality that if you want to have a functional Hong Kong population, you kind of need to have a Hong Kong that's got a better supporter to it in that sense, and in the sense of Hong Kong today, it's better for it to be under the current arrangements it is in, because now it's basically the exclusion wall that existed before is now removed, and of course I'm not saying it's a perfect place and there's all sunshine and rainbows. No, of course not. Of course there's issues anywhere else. But the point is, in terms of historical precedent, it's at the advance and the means to get better. Thank you for watching.